Hi, everybody. I am Christa of Practical Astros, and I'm here with my friend Whitney Kranz of Astro Arcana. Hi, Whitney. Thanks for joining the show.
Hello, thank you so much for having me today, Krista. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Yeah, I was saying before recording that it might be a conversation that either you and I have again or you have with other people. I encourage other astrologers to have this conversation if you don't already. And what inspired it is that you and I were in Nightlight Astrology's Moon Roots and Spheres program last, or I guess, yeah, last year. And
Yeah,
one of the
last two
things,
years, right?
last 2 years, yeah.
Yeah.
But one of the last meetings that we had, it kind of came up, a question came up about how Adam Ellenboss deals with like recovery from particularly hard readings or just doing too many readings. And there were so many wonderful responses. One that he gave, that also people gave in the chat. I was like, I want to have this conversation like longer because we only had like a minute or two before we went on to another question. And so whenever something kind of like ding, 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 like my little bell, I was like, this will just be another chance to talk to an astrologer, which is not so secret why I have a podcast so I can talk to other astrologers. But that is part of my self care, and I will get into that. So we're going to talk about self care for astrologers and other esoteric healers. You know, people that are in this kind of line of work. And so I just kind of threw this together of some basic things of what we can do. But we're just going to start, and it'll be a fairly quick conversation. We'll touch on some things. But firstly, I wanted to ask you about what does your practice look like? And then how do you take care of yourself before, during, and after your sort of practice?
I just want to echo how important this conversation is because I don't think as astrologers we talk about it enough. I think so much of our content ends up being focused. I mean, obviously on clients as marketing, right? But there is this whole piece uh, of how astrologers can connect with one another and support one another.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really appreciate that we're having this conversation because I, when I started reading charts, I wasn't really doing a whole lot
Yeah.
of self-care, self-protection, right? Based on this craft. It has become its own sort of living thing that I have had to bring in, like as I adapt
Mm-hmm.
to really wearing that astrologer hat. Because I think a lot of students start out in astrology with an understanding that astrology is theory based, right? And in some way, in many ways, it is. But I explain to my clients, right, that like astrology is theory and learning the rules and learning the significations and all of that for about 50% of the work. The other half of the work is this connection to the divine, to the oracle. And it takes it takes some care on our part to tend that connection, just like it takes care on our part to tend the connection with each other, with humans
Mm-hmm.
in real bodies, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that as we move through this conversation, I'll continue to drop in some of the things that I like to do. But generally, as an overview, when I read for clients, I always start with, of course, the preparation with the chart itself,
Mm-hmm.
being sure to have my own like time boundary, not to spend too long astrologizing the chart before I meet with the client, right? Because context always matters. And then right before I connect with a client, this is why I'm usually about 2 minutes late for every single reading because I never leave enough time, is I always sit here and take several deep breaths of grounding meditation to come back into my center. I feel through the crown of my head that connection
Mm.
with the spirit, with the oracle. I open up that, we could say, chakra. And this is all very internal, right? It looks like I'm
Hmm.
doing nothing. And then before I start, after I've grounded, cleansed, opened up the connection, I usually do some visualization. And the visualization is typically me reaching out with my hands to embrace this person who I've often never met, right? Like
Hmm.
a psychic hand holding type of a
Hmm.
thing. So there's the connection to the oracle, there's the connection to the client. And then I light my candles. I have a candle for vibes, just like pure vibes, because it's a big,
Hmm.
beautiful pillar. And I have a what I call my divination candle. And it sits in, you can actually see because it sits right on my desk. It's in this beautiful citrine
Mm-hmm.
geode. And so and when I light those candles, I call on the combination of intellect, intuition, and inspiration. And sometimes I'll add some more things in there, but this whole ritual is basically just a prayer of connection,
Hmm.
connection and cleansing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I start my readings. I'm interested to hear your practice, Krista.
Well, it's similar. Definitely the breathing, even if it's a quick like breathing session. I usually have candles going anyway in my house.
Vibes.
It's all vibes. But similarly, it's just before I start the meeting, and nothing can really puncture it in between me doing the breath practice and starting the meeting, because then I feel like I'm tuning into just the winds that are coming through. And so it's all
Mm.
about breathing out my own stuff, getting enough of my own wind out so that when I breathe in and I hold it, I'm holding in the breath of what's kind of coming through. So we think of even like the transits being kind of the movement of the planets around us as being like a wind that fills us or whistles over us like some sort of Peruvian flute. It's just barely using me as a vessel to kind of communicate the spirit that wants to come through. But I have learned how to do that. No one taught me to do it, and when I started to do it, it made all the difference, and not
Hmm.
holding on to the reading afterwards. And so that's why it is the non-negotiable for me, even if it is only like 1 or 2 minutes. If I don't do that, then I will hold on. I'll get sticky with the reading, and I'll carry that reading with me. And it took me a couple of times of forgetting to do it where I held on to that client's stuff a little bit longer. That I learned to just do it. And you can do it very simply, but it's just that breath, just like a simple breath work of cleansing your own mind out and having the new winds come through. I always have water, and it's like bad podcast etiquette to have like big clunky glasses of water because they make that noise when you set them down. But I can't not have water around. I feel like it's important. One, it's just hard to talk for an hour without water, but I like the energy of water. And another friend of mine, she would do readings in person, and she would always have a glass of water next to her during the reading, and she would just pour it out. It was almost like the water became like a place to hold. She would have her water that she drank, but there was like a symbolic container to hold all the emotion that was stirred up in the reading. And then she would dump it out afterwards, like dump it into a plant or outside. She's not just pouring it down the drain, but as a symbolic emotional container to hold it. And I appreciate that. It's why I put the water, fire, earth, air is like, there are different ways we pull in all the elements to prepare us. And the cleansing part isn't like a purification. It's more about getting the astrologer's junk out of the way, so to
Mm.
speak, so that we can be kind of the clearest conduit for whatever is pulled through. Um, I like that you brought in citrine because I was going to ask if you use stones. I know a lot of astrologers use stones. I'm fairly new to stones. I have like a couple that I've always loved. And so I use those. And through saffron, I've been introduced to so many more. But do you use any herbs or any herbal allies, any sort of teas or anything like that with your reading?
I yes, I definitely do. It's one, I love that you bring the elementals into this because those are instincts, right? Isn't it
Mm-hmm.
interesting that no one taught you how to do that, right? No one taught me how to do whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is I'm doing over here. It's a deeply instinctual felt sense. And I never thought about the fact that, of course, having a glass of water is important. And I'm the same. I got this big old clunky thing of
Yeah.
water. Every single reading and also every single podcast I am on, you will always see me
Mm-hmm.
with a big old cup of tea. I think that helps kind of keep the literal and metaphorical juices
Mm-hmm.
flowing, and is part of the inspiration. But I am always drinking either and or rose tea, right? As sort of a
Mm-hmm.
heart opener, connection focused tea and herb, or I am drinking a cinnamon tea.
Mm-hmm.
I love oh my gosh, there's a tea brand called India something. I'll put it in the
There's
comments.
Organic India.
Yes, that's
Organic
yes.
India, yes, yeah.
Yes.
They do
Yep.
Tulsi teas.
Yes,
Yes.
there's a Tulsi cinnamon rose
Oh,
that
yes,
has
it's so
both of
good.
them
So
together,
good. Mm-hmm.
which I think is so perfect because I love cinnamon in in both readings and podcasts because there's something to that bit of like elemental fire that
Mm-hmm.
keeps my attitude on point, right?
Yeah.
It gives you that sort of fiery inspiration. And you heard that with my candles. I work a lot with fire. I
Mm.
have a grand fire trine in my own natal chart, and maybe that's part of it. But
But
those
you're
are the
fire
two.
rising, right? So it's like
Yes,
part
I
of like
am.
it's
It's
like
my
it's
dharma.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly. But isn't that interesting? I also every single day, and it was very spotty before I started practicing. But every single day I'm also using mycelial support, right?
Mm-hmm.
My mushrooms, I'm obsessed with lion's mane. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
it gives me that sort of quick wit, right? That's
Mm.
like every single day. I also, and I always do that by tincture form. I also do turkey tail just as like a general sort of, that's like less psychic protection and more just like immune protection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maintaining your physical health in order to do this sort of work. But then just back to the stones before we move on, the citrine I rely on as a Leo rising, that sunny
Mm-hmm.
quality just really fits and connects with me. And I also will have like an obsidian on my desk just as
Mm-hmm.
that protective layer over my work, right? A
Mm.
shielding. I actually work a lot with shielding. You mentioned your ritual of the breath and the wind. I love that visualization, bringing the wind into
Mm-hmm.
it. And I find that with my visualization, if I'm visualizing before a reading, the way I'm connecting physically and psychically with a client, right? That sort of hand holding, whenever get off of a reading, I always visualize that disconnection, right? The
Mm-hmm.
severing of the bond is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that you open up the space and you close the space. And having if you use visualization to open it, it makes sense that you would use the visual to like snip it, like cut the end, you know. Um, the interesting thing about turkey tail, I take lion's mane all the time. I've always loved lion's mane. I love turkey tail and reishi. I love cordyceps. I love all the agaricon. I mean, I love all those mushrooms. But the turkey tail, I have turkey tail in my yard. And turkey tail is such a beautiful mushroom. And I have turkeys, the bird, in my yard too. And the medicine associated with turkey, like the Native American indigenous medicine, is that it's called giveaway medicine. And it's like this way of giving what you have. And it's this generosity. It reminds me of the Six of Coins card in tarot of just like, as your cup overfloweth, you share it with those immediately around you. And so I've also associated that giveaway medicine, that benevolence of turkey with turkey tail mushroom. And though while it is like an immunosupportive mushroom, I always feel like it's like giving yourself a good dose of generosity so that you can share it with others. So
That
I,
is
I just made it up, but
beautiful.
it makes sense to me.
Yes, it does. Isn't it amazing? Well, I'm not surprised that I learned something here, first of all. And isn't it amazing just to go back to the fact that a lot of this is intuitive, right?
Hmm.
The medicine we need finds its way into our
Yeah.
bodies in some sort of way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, often in the herbalist world, the plants that grow around you are often the ones that you might need. And so it's good to look around like what plants grow easily around you? What plants do you have a good time growing, or which ones don't really have good luck growing? It's like that in itself can be the relationships that you need to tend to within the plants. And I see that with clients too. Sometimes a client, it'll just be really clunky to get a schedule on the books, or there'll be a cancellation and there's just miscommunication. And sometimes that's a way to be like, maybe it's just not right for this time. Maybe I should refer you to someone else. And it's no offense, but there's a disconnect. And if we try to force it, it's I just like that will often be a sign of like, I'm just going to refer you to another astrologer because I don't, I just don't feel like this is a good fit for whatever reason. I'm very diplomatic, seventh
It,
house sun, like you are. So very
yes.
diplomatic, but it's like that in itself. And you can see that in the plant world too. It's like the plants that grow near you are ones that often want to grow near you because they have medicine to offer you. Right. And so I see that just reflected in the kinds of relationships that we nurture with whatever field we work in astrology. It's just like a weirder field than most people work in. So it's like we do things in a little bit stranger way, um, which like kind of brings me into this rest. And we can talk about nourish after this, but I was thinking about rest. And then before we started to record, I pulled a card and it was the Four of Swords, which is this
Mm.
person that is sleeping with, three swords above their head and one sword underneath. But it's such a restful card. And it's not just you need sleep and you need to not be doom scrolling or like obsessing over charts at like 3 a.m. because your mind won't stop, sort of thing, which you need to not do that too often. You actually need rest. But it's also rest from being the astrologer in your outside group, because a lot of people will hound you for your astrological insight. If they know you're an astrologer, they'll want free readings. They'll want you to answer this question for them or explain it or defend astrology, all these things. That in itself, it's like chipping away at your ability to just be a human. And so interacting with groups, outside of an astrology group is definitely something you should do. You should not just have astrology friends. You should have like other friends that have nothing to do with astrology, but are still your friends. But being really careful about your boundaries and your time boundaries with people, especially if people are asking for your astrological insight over and over. And sure, I'm going to tell people if they ask me, but I don't. I'm coming up with better parameters for how much I allow that, because like I value this, and if you want to know more, you can come and pay me to talk to you about it. Otherwise, I'm not going to be like your entertainment at a party just because you found out I'm an astrologer. So I wanted to ask you about that specific little niche piece of being an astrologer. Do you have that
Hell
experience?
yes, every single day. Okay, not every day because I rarely leave the house anymore, but every weekend at least.
Yeah.
No, I think that is so important. As astrologers doing sacred work, we can and should say no when people are crossing our boundaries. But first, we have to define what those boundaries even are, right? And I think it's funny because how many times when you introduce yourself at some sort of social event and people always ask you what you do because first it's your name and then it's like, oh, what do you do for a living? You're like, well, is this when I actually tell you that I am
Hmm.
an astrologer, or is this when I say, oh, I create content or
Hmm.
something like that?
I'm a consultant.
Yeah, exactly. I
Yeah.
do one-on-one consultation. Yeah, exactly. Sometimes I'll say, oh, I'm a coach.
Yeah. I'm a
Which
futurist. That's what I've
yeah,
told some
which
people
is
before.
oh, I love that. My Aquarius loves the futurist. But how many times I feel like this is a good one for folks to respond to in the comments too. Have you heard the, oh, guess my sign? You're an
Hmm.
astrologer? Well, then what am I?
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, I'll think about it and I'll be like, I wonder if I could guess who you are. And I have, but the number of times that this has happened, I just shut them down right away
Mhm.
and say, "Oh, sorry, I'm off the books right now." And then
I will
usually
ask
I'll put
them, why do you want me to guess your sign? Because that will actually help me answer the question a lot better.
yes. Oh my gosh, I love that. And see, it's because most people just don't know anything astrology except their sun sign. I'll say something like, "Nope, not in, the astrologer isn't in right now. We're
Hmm.
socializing or I'm
Yep.
having a cocktail or whatever. Nope, the astrologer isn't in." But let me tell you why that doesn't really work because how you represent yourself on the outside is often more about your rising sign than it is your sun sign. So
Hmm.
even if I were to guess your guess your sun sign or your rising sign, you may not know it and it might
Yeah.
not be right. But I think it goes back to that point that the work we do is sacred and we need to treat it that
Hmm.
way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I vacillate between being just overly protective of the work and not wanting to share it with people that I'm not sure, because I've had enough people either scoff or just eyes glaze over.
Hmm.
Um, and I joke, I'm like, well, I'm also into lucid dreaming. Can I bore you with that subject instead? But it's like I take it seriously, and so it's not a parlor trick for me. It's not something that's just to be, like I hold it very sacredly. I hold it very tenderly. I'm very proud of it. And so you don't get to have access to that if I feel like you're going to just be disrespectful based on your own like poor experience with just surface level newspaper pop astrology, which, I've gotten into conversations with family members that don't agree with astrology. And in the context that I can speak to them at, it's like, well, if you're a Christian, you see like TV, even evangelists, just raking people for money. Like, is that Christianity? Because oftentimes the astrology you see is like the TV evangelist version of that. Yes, they might be some sort of tangentially related, but fundamentally, like the motivation for pop astrology and the motivation for like a consultant that is holding people's hands in really tender moments in their life when they're trying to make decisions, those are very different stories. And so it's just being careful and protective of that. But so that's the other end of it, is like when people are interested in you being an astrologer, they'll take from you. Or if they are not interested in you being an astrologer, and it's not their responsibility to be interested in it. But if they then attack you, then that's why it's good to have the preparation of protection for both the people that want to take from you and both of the people that want to attack you. It's just an odd position. I'm sure there's other positions where people have that wide spectrum of just publicly approved assault, on
Right.
our work. But for these purposes, I can't think of any.
No,
Um,
that's it. The way you described all of that, I could really feel in the most beautiful way your Scorpio coming through,
mhm.
right? The protectiveness of the thing that you love. And I think that's so I just think that's so, so true. But you mentioned lucid dreaming, so now I'm seeing sleep
Mhm.
on the screen and feeling like maybe we should talk about what happens in the dream world.
Yeah, that is a whole other thing. And I'm going to be leading a lucid dream deck and walk later this year to teach people how to lucid dream, but to experience the decans through their dream life. Lucid dreaming is like my one of my absolute passions in life. I love it. I have a lot of fortune in the 12th house, really very close to my Pluto. And I don't associate 12th house with dreams just from the 12 letter alphabet that like Pisces is dreams in the 12th house and all that stuff. But I feel like that's where my lucid dreams kind of help me. And that's where they come through my chart. But yeah, lucid dreaming is a whole other subject that I wish we had time for today because I do love to talk about it. But
I will
um,
just know I'm going to sign up for your course because I
yeah,
know we're going to talk about inspiration right
yeah,
later in our discussion, and Deck and Walk high on my list
hmm,
for inspiration, for personal inspiration,
yeah,
but also dream work. And I have just recently, only in the last year, really been, I feel like my soul is remembering this work, remembering
mm-hmm.
this dream work, because, and we're just gonna have to do another episode about dreams, okay?
Yeah, that's fine. um, So let's talk a little bit about just body nourishment because I think it's easy to forget, when we're in a space where so much of it is intellectual and it is emotional, we forget just the body itself. So having good, clean, quality, consistent food is so key. And I just wanted to put it up there. I have a Taurus moon, so I'm like, want to make sure you get some food, but good food, but then also what you digest digitally, because we also consume so much information through the media that we consume. And that is both news and TV shows and music. But we have access to the entire universe basically from our phones, where we can scroll and consume these tiny little morsels of just like the headlines of really bad stories. And even, bad astrology takes, it's like we can consume so much of these tiny little unrelated bits of information that I wanted to put up there that we all know it, but it's deserved to be repeated, of just keeping the media diet mindful and the physical diet mindful. I don't know. I don't have anything more to say of that, but I wanted to just at least include it. Do you have any thoughts on that
Yeah.
before?
No, I think it both of the theme that runs through both of these points is consumption
Mm-hmm.
overall, right? And being mindful about consumption. One of the things that oddly, maybe not so oddly, happened to me when I started deepening into my own practice, and especially when about 2 years ago I opened my professional practice, is that I recognized, and I've always had a healthy diet. That's really important to me. Um, but I've always enjoyed a couple alcoholic beverages here and
Mm-hmm.
there, right? And one of the things that I learned when I deepened into my practice was that I can't just casually consume alcohol anymore because it's like static in the field. I don't claim
Mm-hmm.
any sort of psychic ability, right? And this is probably the most public or the most woo-woo sort of public conversation that I've had, right?
Mm-hmm.
But but there is a dulling of the senses that we can
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge with alcohol consumption, right? And it doesn't mean, I'm by no means sober, but I know that, you know, pretty much the only day that I'll have alcoholic drinks anymore is on a Saturday night after I know all of my work, all of my astrology work for the
Mm,
week is done. Because
hmm
in that way, I know I give my body some time to recover and cycle that out. But I'm also not like over here on a pedestal, like, this is what you must do to be a successful astrologer. I know and work with plenty of wonderful people who are super comfortable, like in this setting, or having a beer or whatever with
hmm
having a beer with their astrology. And I think maybe that works for some people and maybe it doesn't work
hmm
for some people, but it's just about recognizing your own boundaries for consumption. And I
Yeah.
think like on the next page too, I know we're going to talk about like general support, right?
hmm
And I think consumption goes along with like social media, like you're talking about social media breaks, right? For our nervous system to be supported to our for our nerve, because there's this crazy thing that happens when we start scrolling, and I've recognized it in myself that all of the sudden all of this information means that our heart starts beating a little bit faster because we're consuming
Mm,
knowledge on a little bit of a higher level, right? And if your feed like mine is full of astrology content, that can sometimes work its way into astro anxiety, right?
hmm
And if you're interested, for our listeners more in this, I recently or in December did a 2026 year ahead workshop with Alexandra Blair and Sarah Posh. And for that workshop, I developed, I kid you not, a 68-page self-care workbook for the year ahead.
Wow.
It's drawn out monthly, right? But there's about 10 pages in the introduction because I had been confronting or helping my clients confront astro anxiety for the last several months. I wrote this whole section on what astro anxiety is and how we can manage that anxiety that we start to feel when we get just a little bit too inside of a chart or
Mm,
too
hmm
inside of our heads. And just as my last note on this sort of like social media consumption, for astrologers, I'm speaking to the astrologers here, like you and I, who are consistently creating work for others to consume. We need to, as creators, unplug from unintentional astrology content consumption
hmm
because there's a way in which that can, whether you want it to or not, start informing your opinions. And,
mm,
I write these weekly, like Astro of the Week posts, right? And in a perfect world, I have those completed the week before. Is it a perfect world? No. So, every Monday I'm working on these Astro of the Week posts right before I post them.
Yeah.
And that's before, and that's typically after, other people's Astro of the Week sort of content comes out. And I know, don't listen, don't watch, don't even look, don't touch social media before that's done because again, it starts clouding your field when you hear
Mm,
other astrologers' opinions. I mean, of course, sometimes that's helpful as well, but I'm a pretty mutable girl, so
yeah.
it kind of seeps in, and then
Yeah.
you hear yourself saying what somebody else said, and you're like, is that real, or is that me, or is that them?
Yeah. And that brings up a good point of, we do this for work. We do this as a business. And so I think that it can inform, what you create. And I hate the word content, but there's no other word that
There
really fits
isn't.
it. So it's like, what are you creating and why are you creating it? I have Uranus in the first house. So I have like this placement in my chart that I get to just blame or acclaim. This tendency of mine is that I do things on my own time. And while I have like a Substack and I have intentions of doing things in a certain time frame, I have learned to write when the spirit of writing comes through me. And that kairos time of opportunity is very different from the chronos time of mechanical linear time. And so I have removed that time boundary, which is not even why I put those words on the screen. Time boundary for I'll give that reason in a sec, but it's like I get to write when it comes through because the whole point of me creating writings or making videos, um, or making these little worksheets or all the things that I do, teaching classes, is because I'm inspired to do it, and I feel like I have something that I want to share. I'm not going to do it out of an obligation because I feel like I have to fill up a content calendar or I have to meet some sort of quota that I have arbitrarily set up for myself. And I understand why people do that because they're doing it for business and they want to have enough consistency and they want to feed the algorithm monster and all that. And I think that it's like, who is reading what you're writing if you're writing it under duress of just fulfilling a deadline? It's just not inspiring to read. And if you use Chat GPT to do it, you can tell that too. It's just hollow. And so if you do creations for your astrology work, just follow your own timeline. It's going to be more honest, it's more authentic. If you consume social media of other astrologers, sometimes you'll get like envy and jealousy of like, how are they able to do so much work? I can't do that much work. Well, that's fine. Don't do that much work. Do exactly what you were called to do. Because if you sing your own song in your own voice, people are going to resonate with that, even if it is just once or twice in a month, as opposed to every 5 days or whatever it is. It's just like following your own authentic song is so vital to keep that reciprocal energy going. Otherwise, you will burn out. So for astrologers, like trying to make their way in the social media world and getting enough followers and subscribers and clients and all this, you are setting yourself up for burnout real fast if you try to meet some sort of arbitrary benchmark. If you create the patterns and the supportive self-care structure for yourself to do the work for the right reason, for that heart-centered reason, then you won't burn out. I will work really late into the night when I'm inspired and I won't be tired. I'll be like, I wish time did not exist so I could finish it now. It's like there's a different type of work when you're just doing it to fulfill this hollow obligation, as opposed to fulfilling your heart's desire. It's like there's that. The time boundary
Yes.
I put though was to have a time boundary specifically with clients, because if you have a client that takes too much time in a reading, like we're about to run out of time right now, it's like having too much time, or a client that emails you over and over and you've already passed on the type of reading. That's why I put that time boundary there. But it turns out it was also for this reason too.
No, the way you said sing your own song
Mm-hmm.
really lit lit a flame within me because you don't want to snuff that magic. You don't want to snuff the flame. You don't want to
Yeah.
snuff the magic that is coming through. And I think that that's one of the most challenging thing for astrologers because we are creative people
Mm-hmm.
and creativity does not always come at will, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's up to us to recognize that that different people work at different paces
Mm-hmm.
because of their own strengths and the people that you are trying to reach, the clients that are meant for you will hear that song no
Mm-hmm.
matter the cadence or the frequency, right? Because the clients who are meant for you will find you. I
Yeah.
really strongly believe in that. And at the same time, oof, it's really hard for me to stick to my 60-minute reading time
Mm-hmm.
boundaries. It
Yeah.
really is because, and I think it's because of that like deep connection that I work to
Mm-hmm.
build that it can feel, I'm like, oh, just one more thing. Like, oh, and
Yeah.
what about this? There's like a passion to that where this is why I build in like a non-negotiable 30 minutes between
Mm,
readings. Like,
mm-hmm,
my schedule is set that I can't take more than, actually, I think that I can't take more than, 3 clients in a day, which never happens. I usually close the day after two
mm-hmm.
because that's a lot of energy
Yeah.
flowing, right? But I know I need that at least 30 minutes between clients to reset, right?
Yeah.
Cleanse the energy. And I know this about me. I'm usually a couple minutes late, which means I'm usually running a couple minutes
Yeah.
late. Oh.
I put body work in here too, just because I feel like it's to go to a massage therapist or getting a facial. I love getting facials, and it just feels like it takes so much because often this is all that people see, you know? And so there's something about the face, like the face that I bring with the symbolic facial of just nourishing my skin, the décolleté, the neck, the head, like my scalp, all of that just feels important to cleanse. But massage, especially, I feel like we hold so much in our body, even if we don't think that we do. Getting massage is so vital.
Well, and
Swimming,
movement.
sauna,
Yes,
movement. Yes. Yeah.
exactly. It's like what is helping all I'm gonna say the word juices again. I'm so sorry. What is working to help all of
The
those juices
energy.
flow?
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. That I know I love that you bring up facials too, because I am a religious facial person. And isn't it funny that so this year I made this big transition from full-time corporate work to full-time astrology. I still have my
Mm-hmm.
part-time job, my part-time corporate work on the side, which means I'm a really busy person. But in that transition, what happened? Well, my income is unstable. I cut
Mm-hmm.
every single thing out of my life. I literally haven't gotten my hair cut or colored in a year,
Mm-hmm.
but I kept in the facials
Yeah. You
because you're right.
prioritized it.
Yes, there's like an energy to it that
Yeah.
really helps.
Yeah. So finding what just awarding yourself that and writing it off for your taxes if you can, you know, like this is important work. This is research, whatever you want to call it.
I like the way that you think. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Yes, I am doing that. I think that like in that vein too is also like the sort of mental fitness, which I'm
Mm-hmm.
glad we're on the inspire slide now because you know, there's the mental fitness and the mental health of like when we provide counseling for people, we should probably have our own counselor
Mm-hmm.
ourselves, right? Adam
Mm-hmm.
Ellenboss, our mutual teacher, says that, and I think that is so important, but also this like mental inspiration piece of it of what
Mm.
we're doing to feed our own growth, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know you're a huge reader, and I'll share that one of the things that I've been doing, I dove into over the last several months under these water trines was I felt a calling to dig into my own ancestral lineage. And
Yeah.
while I'm very up to date or semi fluent in Greek and Hellenistic based myth, right? Because of the nature of the work that we do, I bought both the poetic and the prose Edda of Norse mythology. I have several other like Viking era source
Mm-hmm.
texts that I'm working my way through because that isn't it interesting? The myth, the archetypes within myth not only feed our practice, but
Mm.
they feed our soul too,
Oh yeah.
right? We can't do our work without that inspiration.
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely love stories. It's how I think that we just survive. I think stories are the currency of immortality. Stories repeat. That's why Greek myths are still taught in schools today, is because people don't really change. We relive the same stories over and over again. Stories, to know a story, and that's why, so I taught a Deccan workshop that was basically through the art of storytelling. because that's to me how the decans work, is that they are the stewards of stories through our own chart. And you can enter and exit any place. You don't have to start a decan walk in Aries. You can just start whenever the story is drawn you in. But the stories through like mythological stories and fairy tales, we remember them forever. We remember them for a long time. And if you live a good story, like if you live an inspired life, if you do the things that bring you joy, you're going to have a more interesting time. And I put this slide up here for things that inspire you outside of the astrological realm. It's a reminder to not just be stuck in, I have plenty of notebooks with all my notes, and I have my charts, and I have my text threads, and I have my projects in Canva and my projects in Google and all these things. Like I have lots of things going on. I have a whiteboard just behind the screen with all of the things that I'm going to do. But also I have animals, and I have a family, and I have a town, and I have places I like to visit. I have countries I like to travel to. I like to sky watch. I like to listen to music. It's like all these things that, yes, I will pull the astrology in immediately, but I'm also doing it just for the joy of doing it itself. And it's interesting that you brought in the family lineage, because I have been looking at my family lineage. I found out I am related to the second governor of New York, Francis
Wow,
Lovelace. I knew that
Krista!
I'm a direct descendant of the signers of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And so I knew I had that, but this was a whole different line. And it took me on this wild goose chase. And I found super old paintings of my ancestors in England and Ireland just recently. And so it's funny. I printed off Francis Lovelace because he's the ancestor that I'm going to be working with through this tarot practice of a book that I got called Ancestral Grimoire. It's about using tarot to connect with your ancestors. And so I went down this whole ancestral rabbit hole recently.
Beautiful. Yes,
Yeah.
those water trines. You're a
Mm-hmm.
water rising, right?
Yep.
This is
Yep.
your dharma. That's so beautiful. I love that we're on a similar journey there. It's just so interesting and so, when I talk about my connection with the gods, I always refer to my personal pantheon, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
we all have these these various spirits we can call on, right? And sure, I've got Mercury and Artemis, but my grandma Laura, she's in there too,
Mm-hmm.
right? Learning these stories through I'm really lucky because my grandfather did was very, very into family lineages, and I have a huge family tree going back to the early 1600s in
Mm-hmm.
Norway. And to be able to look at that family tree and see these names that I recognize somehow,
Yeah.
I feel them, right? It's potent in such a different way to understand that it's more than the land spirits. It's more than our
Mm.
deities. It's our ancestors too, who are here to support us and ultimately inspire us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Speaking of inspiration, if you're inspired to talk to Whitney, this is her website here. I asked her if she had Gemini placements because I associate the word bestie. Gemini just calls everybody their bestie. Um, Astro Arcana is your website, is your company name, your astrology name, but it's also your website. And you can book readings. You can learn more about Whitney, read about the offerings that she has. Anything else that you want to share before we wrap
Yeah.
up? Thanks for sticking on
Wow.
for a few more
Oh
minutes.
my gosh, of course. While you're there on my website, if you are interested in that workbook where we
Mm.
dive into self-care through the entire year of 2026, including that beautiful introduction. I have that available as a digital product on my website, so you can
Awesome.
pick that up there. The other reminder is to head on over to my channel on YouTube. It's astro.arcana.astrology, where I have my regular podcast, The House of Good Spirit, where I talk about every single lunation that we experience and the astrology around that. Same handle, astro.arcana.astrology for Instagram as well to connect with me in my DMs
Awesome.
to become my astro bestie.
That's right. I'll put all those in the show notes, so it'll be nice little clickable links. But
Thank you.
thank you so much for joining the conversation. I do feel like we should maybe check in with each other in a few months and like do it all over again because there was so much that we didn't even talk about.
I think we could have an episode too.
Yes.
Absolutely.
But if you are an astrologer and if you also have a platform, have the conversation too. I want to hear what everybody does. I feel like we're thirsty to have this conversation. And I picked up tips from you just now, like today doing this. So if we start to build this, I feel like we can build a more safer and more reciprocal and nourishing practice. We do this for money, and people that we didn't even get into that of how people have hangups about charging for their services. I mean, there's so much about this topic that I would like to hear more people talk about and dispel, like puncture that bubble of can't talk about it. I think that self-care for practitioners is a worthy thing to talk about, and may 2026 be the year that we like just start to really speak about it more loudly. So thanks for joining me for this first episode of probably a few.
I sure hope so. You are very welcome. This was my pleasure. This was incredible, and I'm so inspired, and I can't wait to continue the conversation. Thanks,
Awesome.
Krista.
All right, we will stop it there. And thanks everybody for joining, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.